Welcome, everyone. This is the Booktalk Nation event with Jim Butcher and Anton Strout. This will work a little bit like an author event in a bookstore. Jim will talk about his book, Skin Game. If you haven't purchased Skin Game, you can do so at booktalknation.com or right here on this video page, and Jim will sign and personalize it for you. Mysterious Galaxy, Redondo Beach will fulfill all of the orders and ship them to your door. The sales of these signed and personalized copies will close tomorrow night, so you want to make sure you get your order in by then. These books will ship in late May. You'll notice that there is a chat box under the video window. I think a lot of you have found that already. You can use the chat box to interact with Jim during the video chat and enter your questions. In about 20 minutes, Jim will answer the questions from the chat and also answer some of the questions that you submitted ahead of time when you RSVP'd for the event. Until then, I'm going to hand it over to our interviewer tonight, Anton Strout. Anton is the author of Simon Kandar's Urban Fantasy series and the Spellmason Chronicles for Ace Books. Anton's books are actually also available on booktalknation.com as well. So welcome, Jim and Anton. And Anton, I will turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks. Hey, Jim. Good to see you again. We seem to run into each other at conventions here and there as you're running to and fro.
Exactly.
Skin Game is the 15th book in the series, once again focusing on Chicago's only professional wizard, Harry Dresden. Now, he's been through a lot in that time, and this book kind of sounds like it's your preternatural Ocean's 11 going on here.
That's exactly what it is. That was actually the movie I had playing in the background while I was writing it. So.
Okay, and I have to wonder, with every book you've been upping the stakes, ratcheting it up, and I'm wondering, how do you keep this kind of fresh and interesting for you at this level?
I think the key thing, the key way to do that is to be aware that it's going to have an ending. If that's really what causes a book to go stale is when is a series to go stale is when it sort of keeps circling the same thing over and over again. If you know you're heading towards an ending and you're planning for it and you're setting things up for it, you don't really have nearly as much. I don't think there's any kind of problem with that sort of thing. I've got an awful lot of work to do and many things to get done before we get to the end of the story. So I don't really get bored with it. I don't have an issue with it being fresh because I'm still writing, I'm still writing on the same big overstory.
Do we know how far off this ending is to the tale?
It's going to be about 20-ish of the case books like we've seen so far, and then a big old apocalyptic trilogy at the end. Because who doesn't love apocalyptic trilogies? And
sure.
that'll kind of capstone the series.
Now, when you started out, did you really expect it to go this far? I mean, did you have the long-term goals in mind from the get-go, or was it like kind of a one-off?
Yeah, I kind of did. After my teacher had read the first chapter, that it was the first time she'd read one of my chapters and said, "This is good. This will sell." And she's like, "Well, what do you have planned next?" And I said, "Well, I don't really have anything planned yet." She's like, "Well, plan something and bring it in next week." I'm like, "All right." And I came in the next week with basic story skeletons for 20 books in a series and handed them to her. She just sort of looked at me blankly because I wasn't bright enough to realize that nobody was going to buy a 20-book series. I'm like, "So 20 books, do you think that's okay?" And she kind of looks at me with this very dry expression and says, "Yeah, I think if you can sell a 20-book series, you'll be doing fine," like that. So, but nobody told me it wasn't going to work. So I was too stupid to know. So I went and did it.
Editors do like to see that you have something coming up. If I had heard, "Oh, this guy has 20 books in mind," I'd be a little like, "Okay, easy there, pal."
Yeah, exactly.
But you're probably the exception that proves the rule here, as it were. Now, my question is, because I did 4 books of the Simon Kandar's books, and I've done 3 of the Spellmason Chronicles, and I really wish there was a class or somewhere I could go to really learn how to write a sequel, because you write a tale, and they really don't. There's no way that I planted a lot of seeds. I do what is the Lost School of storytelling, which is plant a lot of seeds. Some are going to grow, some are going to die, but give yourself that room to grow.
Right.
But if I wasn't watching Lost, maybe I wouldn't have really picked up on that, and I would have been in a lot of trouble. Do you find yourself writing yourself into corners that are very difficult to get out of, like, say, if characters die?
Oh, no, that was planned from the beginning.
Okay.
killing that guy because I wanted book 13 for him to be solving his own murder because that seemed an appropriate wizard detective thing to have to do.
Sure.
So that was kind of in the plan from the get-go, was for book 13 to be that. But no, I haven't really had a lot of trouble. I outlined the whole thing, when I was 25, and so far it's working. So I've decided not to mess with it. It's one of those, if it's not broken things, don't go fixing it. So I've got this old outline in an old spiral notebook that I've got, and I'll just go look back at it once in a while, and oh yeah, okay, we're still on track.
Now, how do you keep track of everything at this point? Because with this many books, there's so much that happens. There's so much continuity. Is there a keeper of the sacred lore out there, or is that all you and your giant Bible of notes?
No, I'm useless at this point.
Okay.
By the time you get done with the book, by the time you get done with the book, you've got 7 or 8 or 9 slightly different versions of the same story in your head,
Right.
because you've gone through about that many drafts. And so by the time you multiply that times 15 books, there's no way you can keep track of all of it, of what actually got done. Whereas the fans, all they get is the final version, and so they get to learn it correctly the first time. So for me, I've got like a hive intelligence of beta readers who help me keep track of details, because there's almost somebody catches all the details, and then I'll have to go back and look. Plus, there's a Wikipedia, and I can go look in the Wikipedia, and now there's the role-playing game source book. I will go and look up stuff in the role-playing game source book from time to time when I need information. I'll be in the middle of a chapter and go, wait a minute, how many kids do the Carpenters have? Oh, let me get the Wikipedia up. And okay, that's right. Yeah, okay. Because in one of the first drafts they had more children than that, and I decided to tone it down because it seemed too Catholic. Although that's what they were meant to be, but.
Now, going back a couple of years, I remember when the TV series hit on Sci-Fi, and I remember you would get a lot of questions at conventions about how you felt about it and such, and you were kind of like, well, it doesn't necessarily change what's happened in your books, so it doesn't really affect that, and you know that people are going to, Hollywood and television are going to do what Hollywood and television are going to do.
Right.
But part of my job when I'm not writing is I'm in your sales force at Ace. And I remember just having the logo on there and a series that only lasted a season. Your books were building, but I feel like there's a real jump just because it was suddenly on the radar of people who maybe just don't pick up a genre book.
Yeah, I think I got out of that one season of TV, I think I got maybe 4 or 5 years worth of audience growth.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think I would have gotten there eventually anyway, but I think even having the one season on TV really accelerated that.
Yeah.
And as far as the TV show went, I mean, I'm still of the opinion that it could have been a lot worse. And yeah, it ended after a season, but on the other hand, it also ended before anything could be irretrievably screwed up, I thought. And so I thought it was an acceptable parallel universe Dresden Files.
Do you see it potentially happening in another medium? Like, do you think there will ever be any other attempts at film or television with it, or?
There are talks. There's always talks, and it's hard to say anything just from the talking.
Right.
But I have good hope of some things that are happening right now, and we'll see if we don't get another version of it at some point. I think my ideal would be to see it produced as a feature production series like Game of Thrones. Twist my arm that it goes on HBO.
No, not that.
Hey, HBO, True Blood's off the air after next year, so you're not going to have an urban fantasy thing going anymore.
It's true.
Yeah.
We'll get them right on that.
Yeah, exactly.
I know people. Who am I kidding? If I knew people, I would be totally trying to foist my series on them.
Yeah, exactly.
No offense.
No, none taken.
Now, I'm currently on my 8th book, with no signs of really quitting my day job, as it were. And Shauna McGuire, who does the Toby Day series and also writes as Mira Grant, she's hit the Times list recently multiple times and has only just quit her day job.
Right.
Hitting the Times list means something different now than it, say, did probably when you started. What was the first book for you that really caught notice? Was it right out of the gate that people were really paying attention, or?
Oh God, no. The first 2 years of my career, those first 2 books came out. I would go to signings and not signed a single book. I would go to conventions and go to readings, and nobody would show up to listen to me read my book because nobody knew who the hell I was. It wasn't until book four or book five came out, and that was the point at which I went to Dragon Con, and they were doing a panel that was just the Jim Butcher panel, and I'd had Jim Butcher panels before, and nobody had showed up, and I assumed the same thing was going to happen, and I was running a little bit late, and I was coming down the escalator to Dragon Con, to the room in one of the basement rooms at Dragon Con, and the hallway was just packed with people, and I'm like, oh my gosh, all these people here for another thing. I know there's not going to be anybody there, but at least I should be on time. And I kind of get in line, and I'm sort of standing there fuming a bit, waiting, and then I just notice that the hallway's gone quiet, and everybody's staring at me, and I'm like, am I on fire? What's going on here? And somebody says, you're Jim Butcher, aren't you? And I'm like, yeah. They're like, oh, and everybody goes, oh, and I'm like, what? Are you guys here? We're all here to see you. It's like, what? And that was like this shocked moment where I actually got in there, and there was this, the room was packed with people, and there were people standing along the walls and sitting on the floor, and that had never, ever, ever come close to happening to me before. And I just sort of looked around stunned for a while, and I'm like, are you sure you guys don't have something more productive you could be doing? Because I'm just this guy writing his nerdy little wizard books. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm still a guy writing his dumb little wizard books, and I'm just waiting for people to figure it out. So far it hasn't happened.
The biggest thing, I tend to go to New York Comic Con in San Diego as an author and also as a penguin there, not in a penguin costume, but penguin day job duties.
Right.
The number one question at the booth is always, when's the next Jim Butcher coming up? And I really just want to make up a sign that just says, we don't know, when we don't know, or just give the date, like just so we can stop answering the question over and over. You may have heard also that when they ask that, and I'm like, well, have you read them all? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, well, if you like Dresden Files, my series here is kind of a diet Dresden, as it were. And I don't appreciate your hitman trying to get me for just invoking your name in that. Although I remember, I don't know if you remember this, but maybe one of the first times we met, I think you had just picked up the first book of my series, and I said, Jim, I read Stormfront, and Harry walks up the stairs, closes his door, and right next to his door is a rack of wacky pamphlets of the paranormal world and stuff. And my book, right in the beginning of it, my character goes to his offices, and they get all their training from wacky pamphlets. And I swear I hadn't read Stormfront, and you're like, dude, relax. And I'm like, well, because it's a small pool, like paranormal detective stuff going on there. And
it is.
And part of the reason I have to shy away from reading urban fantasy while I'm in the midst of writing it, I have to go read other things for me because I don't want to be lifting at any point.
Right.
But it makes you, there's a lot of author crazy, as I'm sure you've known over the years. Just when you have two people show up at a panel, and I'm glad they're there, and I will spend as much time as I would with a room full of them. And then other times, suddenly you hit, and you're like, oh my goodness, this room is very, very full suddenly.
Yeah.
We were excited at Comic-Con last year because we had a huge crowd for a panel. There's like maybe 5 of us, and myself and Diana Rowland were super witty and funny, and we thought, oh, we probably garnered some new readers, and we went to the signing area, and there was a huge line at the signing area. I'm like, oh my God, we really won the crowd over. They had to form a separate line for Kim Harrison, who was also on our panel.
Right.
And it really is like, oh, right, let us not forget our place as such. But you went shaved your head bald so you could actually get some time, probably with a little more anonymity at the cons.
That was actually that was on my bucket list, was to try the full-on Charles Xavier, and that had come up in conjunction with my LARP group was running a formal masquerade event. And my necromancer, if you're going to show up formal as a necromancer, you need to be bald.
Sure.
That's just how it works.
Exactly.
So I figured, okay, I can check something off my bucket list here and be a totally hardcore LARPer. So did the whole shaving thing. The really nice thing about that look is when you wear the hood, you've just got like the tiny bit of stubble of hair growing in. It's like Velcro. That hood sticks to your head. Total drama hood. It's awesome. It's like a special effect happening all by itself.
And you're right. It is total union rules of the necromancers that you must be bald.
Exactly.
You know, and if they show
No,
up and see you with hair, forget it. You're
no one
just
will take you seriously if you show up as a necromancer
exactly.
like this. You know, so
Yeah.
I mean that's
So
about as necromancery as Jesus.
right.
Yeah.
Wait a second. Raising the Dead? No, never
Yep.
mind.
See.
Um, Now, I was reading that you came up. You said earlier that you came up with Dresden Files when you were 25. What had you written before that? Because I think you said somewhere that you had been writing since like 19. Or what were you doing for a day job, and what
Let's see.
gave you the idea?
In I started writing my first book when I was 19, and it was an epic fantasy epic, and or so I thought at the time. It was awful. I mean, it was terrible. But I wrote it, and let's see. That was when I was in college. I was working. Let's see. I was doing contract edit, word processing on the side. I was doing web design on this contract web design. I was working at a TCBY yogurt store, going to school, and writing a book. So I was busy. Um, and then as I kept going to school, eventually I got into doing IT for the university, which is a really great job because once you get the problems ironed out, there's not a whole lot to do, or that's very routine. And so off I'm going on writing. And then after I got out of school, I did tech support at a local internet provider, and I had the 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. shift. And by midnight, you're pretty much done dealing with people. And so that's 6 hours that you could be working on books, or playing EverQuest, but also working on books.
Yes, I was more of an EverQuest 2 guy myself, or some Ultima.
Oh, you madman! EverQuest 2? Oh, you're a masochist playing that game.
I know, but I can't play any of them anymore. Like I've become the most casual gamer these days. Although you are going to. Usually I'm chasing your career, trying to get where you are. But I see that I was the guest of honor at Gen Con for the author track a couple years ago, and clearly you were chasing after my dream.
I am clearly following in your wake. I'm trying to emulate you, Andy.
And you're going to be guest of honor this year, and I'm very sad I'm not making it, but twins this year, so I'm not going anywhere, really.
Yeah, you're busy.
Yeah. What do you? I know you're also a gamer. Are you jazzed for Gen Con? You got some gaming stuff lined up there?
Apparently, there's some kind of author participation game that I'm going to be involved in. There's going to be like an author gaming session, and I'm going to be doing live dungeon. Apparently, I'm going to be doing some live dungeon action.
That one's great. I love the setup for that.
I'm a little disappointed that I don't get to hit anybody with a foam sword during the course of live dungeon, but apparently you play shuffleboard instead.
It's
to kill the monsters. So
there's other places to hit other people with foam swords, so there's something for everybody.
Okay, good.
The True Dungeon is just cool. The actual setup is fantastic.
Very
cool. And then you play some shuffleboard. And if you're good at riddles, you'll get far.
I'm the worst at riddles. I'm so terrible at riddles.
Well, I died and came back by the end of it, so there's always a chance for salvation at any point.
When we're LARPing, I'm the guy who throws a shield on the ground and takes a nap when we get to the riddle encounter. It's like, wake me up when there's something to hit.
Now, don't you going to LARP the Dresden Files game at all there?
I think so. I think they're going to be playtesting Dresden Files Live. But I'm not sure. I hardly keep track of that stuff. I'm like the one person who can't play the Dresden Files game.
Well, I was gonna say, aren't you just like able to walk in there like just in a sacred robe and just declare whatever you damn well want for it?
Exactly, and because I'm a power gaming weasel, I can't play my own game. That just wouldn't be ethical, I mean, can you imagine trying to GM me? No, it is that way, and if necessary, I'll write it that way in the next book.
Actually, in book 3, I do believe it said this. Which proves my point.
Well, in book 16, it's going to say this. But on the other hand, I can't GM either because too much like work.
Yeah.
So I'm the one guy who can't play, but I'm glad everybody else is having a good time.
What do you LARP, and what other gaming stuff are you into?
Let's see. I LARPed with. I currently LARP with Heroic Interactive Theater. It's an offshoot of Miro. I
Okay.
did a bunch of LARP with Nero too, and back in the day with the International Fantasy Gaming Society. Let's see. Right now, I'm playing. I play way too much League of Legends online, but I also run a Pathfinder campaign for my kid and my nephews and a bunch of their friends. I realized that my kid had become 21 years old without ever actually having played Dungeons and Dragons, and I
That
was
is a
like,
parent fail.
"Oh my God, I failed as a father." Because we played lots and lots of games, but not D&D. And I'm like, "Oh God, we have to play D&D." But then I went to play D&D, and D&D was fourth edition, so it wasn't D&D anymore. And I'm like, "Oh, this is not the D&D that I know and love and remember." And I had to look around for something that's like, "Aha, Pathfinder. This is the next generation of D&D." And
Yeah,
so,
yeah. The Pathfinder, I haven't had a chance to play much of it, but I know a lot of people who've worked on Pathfinder over the years, and it sounds
yeah, I mean,
fantastic.
yeah, it's it's D&D 3.9 or something like that. But But yeah, I went and got that, and I decided that because we're playing Dungeons and Dragons, when you start playing Dungeons and Dragons, you play the Caves of Chaos. That's how Dungeons and Dragons works. Instead, I decided to set it during a fantasy world zombie apocalypse. So the Keep on the Borderlands is like the last outpost of humanity, of civilization holding on. And so the PCs have to volunteer if they want to be led into the keep. They have to volunteer to serve on the Expeditionary Force, and so the Expeditionary Force gets sent to the Caves of Chaos to make diplomatic contact with the Greenskins to see if they can make an alliance against the zombies. So the Caves of Chaos as a diplomatic mission is just hilarious.
Nice,
It is
nice.
so much fun.
One last thing before we go over to the reader questions. You had done 6 books for the Codex Alera series, which
Yes.
has ended, but you have a new series coming up. You're the Cinder Spires, which is steampunk.
It is. Well, I would probably call it like steam opera, maybe.
Okay.
I don't really I don't really know if you can make up a genre, but really it seems more like steam opera to me than anything else.
I think you're in a position where you can make up your genre at
Oh,
this
okay.
point.
Well,
So
then it's a steam opera.
I'll let Anne know that you're making your own genre, and we'll just take care of it behind the scenes at Ace. So
Oh,
don't worry.
awesome! It's that easy. If I'd known that.
Don't let this go to your head.
Oh, okay.
We have to keep you.
I'm sorry.
When can we expect the first book in this? And what's in it? I know there's cats in here. Unique cats.
There's intelligent cats. The whole thing is kind of Hornblower meets League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Okay.
So it's kind of it's a multiple person viewpoint, like Alera was, but I've set the plot a lot tighter, like the Dresden Files novels are.
Mm-hmm.
So things are happening in I think in a much more compressed time space, and which hopefully I hope will give it a good fast pace. It's gotten a really strong response from my beta readers,
Good.
and I'm having all kinds of fun writing it. So that's a very positive thing. I'm finishing it up now. I've just got to write the big kaboom at the end of the book for the first book, and then I'll be turning it in. I'm not sure when it'll be out after that. That'll be up to the publisher. But I'll be turning it in shortly, and then I can get to work on the next Dresden.
Okay. Well, let's throw this out to the questions. We'll bring Dave back in for Book Talk Nation here.
Well, thanks, guys. That was a good first 25 minutes starting it off. There have been a lot of questions in the chat room that have popped up, so it's time for us to take a few of those for Jim. If you're still on there, which it seems like a lot of you are, you can go ahead and type your question for Jim in the chat box, and he will answer live. We do have a lot, like I said, so we'll get to as many as we can. So, Jim, the first question we have, which came early in the chat, it's from Matt. He says, are we going to ever see any stories from Morgan's point of view? Obviously, this is set in the past, but it would be interesting, he thinks.
It would be interesting. Huh. Yeah, maybe. I hadn't even considered that before. It was Matt who asked it?
That was Matt who asked that. Maybe you owe him a credit in the next book.
Yeah, Matt, I had never considered it before, but it might make for an interesting story, especially in retrospect. Huh, nifty.
There's a lot going on in there right now, right? The wheels are churning.
Yeah, and I'm still trying to do an interview. Boy, you people, so inconvenient. Their story. Okay, sorry. Okay, back. I'm focused.
No problem. Our next question, are Georgia and the baby okay? We last saw her in Aftermath, 8.5 months pregnant and not well off. And then we just see Will by himself and angry.
Oh, yeah, they're fine. Although, Will's just kind of angry, generally speaking. It's mostly because he's just not sleeping very much. He's got a baby werewolf to deal with. That's got to be tough. I mean, just regular parenting's hard enough.
There's a question from Joseph. How has Mouse been? Will you incorporate him into further adventures, or his character been placed on the shelf?
Mouse has been very busy taking care of Maggie, and you'll get to see a bit more of that in the upcoming book. So you'll get an update on Mouse's adventures. Mouse has actually been doing his own children's series, I think, in the back of my head somewhere with Maggie. So.
Very cool. Will we see Faith again? And if so, did she learn to be a wizard?
You will indeed see her, and I'll leave that. Actually, Faith is going to be the client who kind of sets off the big trilogy. She was the first Dresden client in the very first Harry Dresden short story that I wrote. So I want to use her again to kind of kick off the big ending.
The next question is, does Harry have an incorrect understanding of the Dark Hollow and other parts of the world?
Oh God, yes. Harry he's I won't say he's clueless, but his understanding of lots of things, including the way magic works, is incomplete in many ways. If only because he hasn't been trusted by a lot of the wizarding community, by a lot of the people who could have taught him better, and a lot of the people who do know better aren't correcting him because they think it's important to learn these things on your own. So, Harry's going to, he will be stumbling across things that he goes, oh, okay, well, I didn't understand this exactly right. Like, for example, the literal outer gates. That was something that he did not know actually existed. He thought that was a metaphor for a long time.
How did Ebenezer's instant death spell and changes work?
That had to do with Ebenezer's stick. That was all to do with the Blackstaff.
Gotcha. Any more to elaborate?
Well, there are folks who have speculated on where the Blackstaff came from, and that should explain it. For those who piece it together, it's all right. You go out there and find that information for yourself. You'll feel fulfilled and rewarded when you do that.
Perfect. Are Mother Winter and Mother Summer 2-3 fates? If so, what is the third?
No, there. You know what? The person whoever asked that question, read Skin Game, and after you've read Skin Game, see if that doesn't give you an answer to your question, because I'm dropping stuff in there to help folks figure it out.
Fix looks like he had a rather impressive Summer Night sword. Was that part of the standard kit, or something he had managed to get on his own? Is there even a Sword of Winter? And if Harry doesn't get it, who has it? I can do those in layers if you want. Fix looked like he had a rather impressive Summer Night sword. Was that part of the standard kit, or something he had managed to get on his own? That's the first part.
No, that was a blade that Titania had made for him.
Is there even a Sword of Winter?
No, not as such. The knight himself is considered more important. Summer likes to kind of externalize things about violence because they're sort of basically just not quite as attuned to that sort of savagery. Winter, it's much more important for you to be the weapon than it is for you to have the weapon.
Gotcha. And if Harry doesn't get it, who has it?
Well, there's not a sword as such. Harry's kind of expected to be the sword.
Sure. Our next question comes from Jamie. Do other planets except Earth have a Never Never? And if yes, what causes them to have a Never Never?
I've got enough to deal with just the one planet, much less other planets. I mean, there's one planet and there's multiple realities of the one planet running side by side into infinity, and now you want more planets too? Oh! Let me think about that one. I'll get back to you.
I know. Sorry to stretch you out with that one. How many people?
Those Miskatonic level questions.
How many people died because of the events of Deadbeat?
Oh, there were several dozen casualties in Deadbeat, and the wardens who were active there managed to prevent more than that. I mean, the town got kind of crazy, but in Dresden, Chicago, people are very, very good at putting their heads down when things get completely weird, and then pretending nothing happened afterward.
Will there ever be a story with Baby Drac or his daddy?
There might be. Yeah, he's kind of one of those. The Impaler is kind of one of those people I'm saving for later.
All right. The next question is, will we see the Jade Court?
Probably not. You might see some. You might see one of their agents. You'll probably never see them because they're very isolationists, and they like to stay isolated.
The next question, this kind of goes back to our Harry sword question. Why doesn't Harry get a sword? Everyone else gets a sword, and Dimitri says, I thought for sure he was going to get one.
What's he going to do with his sword? He'll cut himself. Honestly, I mean, if he had a sword, he'd fall on it. He would. Somebody would take it away from him and hit him with it. That's the kind of thing that happens.
In the next short story compilation, will we be seeing more of Sigrun Gard?
Let me think. I think she appears in one, maybe. But the only one that actually featured her was Herot. She actually appears in Even Hand. It's the story from Marcone's point of view.
What does Murphy do for a living now that she's not a paid officer?
Well, she's got her half retirement, and she gets a small stipend from the Brighter Future Society, and she's got some money. She's got some money she had put by as well. So she's basically Murphy is scraping.
When will we learn more about the original Merlin?
Let me think. It's going to be a few more books.
How many more? Is it going to be a lot more?
I don't know. A few more. I've got another 5 or 6 books until we get to the kind of the end of the case books, and I think the original Merlin stuff will start coming out a bit more towards the very end.
Gotcha. When you've said before that you'd like to see an animated series made from these books. This person said they would love to see that. Do you have anything to comment on that?
That would be awesome.
Any ideas for who you would want the voices to be?
Oh, well, I mean, if it's going to be an animated series, then we got to get Marsters to do Dresden. If he could be talked into such a thing.
Will Harry drive around in that hearse for the rest of the series?
No.
Not at all.
He's got the Munster Mobile for now, but no.
Next question? Will Maggie play a big part in later books?
Wait and see.
Wait and see. Okay.
Yeah.
Will we see Lash again?
I'm not gonna tell you. I'm not gonna tell you.
You're leaving a lot of cliffhangers. Everybody seems really excited. How did Michael know about Elaine in grave peril?
Oh, let me go back to this. Oh, at that point, Michael and Harry had enough bonding time that Harry had shared some things with Michael that he hadn't shared with anybody else. He'd actually known Michael for about a year by the time Grave Peril got started.
Gotcha. Well, we have time for about one more question, or a few. Let's see if we get a few more questions popping in this last one. We'll keep going. But
okay.
Here's the question: will there be a short story from Kincaid's perspective?
Probably not. Although if I ever get around to writing the short story about Hawaii, then there'll be one where he's at least in it. But it'll be from Murphy's perspective.
I did get another question actually, so let's go with that one.
Okay.
Maybe do one or two more because they're popping up. You're a popular guy, Jim.
I'm sorry.
How dare you?
How did Harry and Michael Carpenter originally meet?
It was on a case that Harry was working that he crossed trails with Michael. I don't want to say too much more than that in case I want to go back and write it at some point. But it's in my notes back there somewhere.
Gotcha.
But they wound up fighting the same bad guy.
In our last question of the evening, who is your favorite character that has only appeared in the Dresden books?
My favorite character from the Dresden books?
Yes.
Oh, I really like one of the guys from Skin Game. His character named Goodman Gray in Skin Game. I really like him. He was fun to write. Bob the Skull is right up there. I have all kinds of fun writing Vadarung because unfortunately, I don't get to write a lot because it's all from Harry's point of view, so I don't get to write, Vadarung's perspective on everything. But he's incredibly funny in my head, but I don't always get to put it out on the into the story.
Do you base these characters, as a kind of a follow-up to that, do you base these characters off of people in real life that you know, like certain personality traits?
God no. I wouldn't do that to anybody that I knew. The one character I did do that with was Shiro, and Shiro is based off of he's a compilation of a couple of martial arts teachers I had when I was a teenager. But other than that.
Well, that brings us about to the end of our event tonight. Before I let you go, I just want to remind everyone about the books for sale. You can purchase a signed and personalized copy of Skin Game right here on this page. Those sales will close tomorrow night, so make sure you get your order in by then, and Jim will sign and personalize the copy for you, and then Mysterious Galaxy Redondo Beach will ship it right to your door. Anton also has 3 books available on BooktalkNation.com, and those orders will be fulfilled by McNally Jackson in New York. We'd just like to give a big thank you to Mysterious Galaxy Redondo Beach for hosting this event, and thank you to McNally Jackson for fulfilling the orders for Anton's books as well. Thank you to everyone who joined us tonight and submitted questions. Jim and Anton, it was a pleasure to have you join us tonight on Booktalk Nation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Have a good night, everybody. Thanks for joining.